This nation was founded by men of many nations and backgrounds. It was founded on the principle that all men are created equal and that the rights of every man are diminished when the rights of one man are threatened. It ought to be possible, in short, for every American to enjoy the privileges of being American without regard to his race or his color. John F. Kennedy.
A native son we see Bigger, as well as the rest of the Thomas family, suffered through racial discrimination, both socially and economically. The Thomas family lives in a cramped, worn-down, rat-infested apartment in the South Side, just barely scraping by. Meanwhile, just miles away, the Daltons and many other white families live in luxury, with large houses, nice cars, and even black servants. Bigger himself feels like the white folks have taken away his opportunities in life to get ahead. This is evident through his conversation with Gus while the two are smoking cigarettes outside and talking, leaning against a red brick wall. A plane flies over them and draws Bigger's attention. Bigger and Gus discuss how the white boys have a natural advantage in society over them. They have the opportunity to work any job that they would like. Bigger talks about how he could become a pilot just as a white boy could, if it were not for his race holding him back. One example of Bigger being held back by the white folks comes in the form of Mr. Dalton. Claiming to be an honest man and a black rights advocate, we see Mr. Dalton charge the poor black citizens unfair prices for rundown apartments in the overpopulated black area of the South Side. Mr. Dalton's exploitation of Bigger and many other blacks in the community incapacitates many of them from moving into better areas with better job opportunities and a better standard of living, consequently forcing many of them to live in these areas their entire lives and raising their kids in the same area, continuing the vicious cycle.
In The Great Gatsby, we witness the unfortunate reality of economic barriers. Evident in both Tom Buchanan and George Wilson, the financial situations in which these characters start with end up staying true throughout their lives, despite their attempt to better their situation. George Wilson, an old, fatigued, lifeless, yet honest and hardworking man, spends his time managing a rundown auto shop in the Valley of Ashes, barely getting off by his earnings. In stark contrast, Tom Buchanan, an arrogant, pretentious, and offensive bully, lives in immense wealth, solely due to the fact that his ancestors were wealthy. His social class status allows him to get away with his behaviors, and his old money draws the attention of poor George Wilson's wife, Myrtle. Myrtle, attracted to Tom for his money, has an affair with Tom behind George's back. George, unable to provide for Myrtle's pathetic monetary needs, is cheated on, and due to his financial situation, does not have the ability to draw Myrtle back to him. Because of his financial situation and inability to provide enough money to support himself and Myrtle, he suffers greatly. Gatsby was able to become a millionaire through illegal means by working as a bootlegger. Gatsby did not have to work hard for his money, while George Wilson works very hard and still has far less money. George Wilson is similar to Bigger Thomas in that both can work as hard as they want, but will never accomplish their dreams. In The Crucible, we see both gender and racial discrimination. The story begins with Abigail Williams, Tituba, and a few other girls conducting suspicious activities in a forest. Soon, rumors of witchcraft spread throughout the village of Salem. After hearing of witchcraft, the townspeople look for a scapegoat. Tituba, a black slave, is the first one they look to because of her identity as an easy target. As seen throughout history, African Americans remain our scapegoat when anything goes wrong. Abigail accuses Tituba because she knows it will work. Tituba is discriminated against because she is both black and female. Arthur Miller's depiction of John Proctor shows clear gender discrimination. John Proctor is seen as a paragon by the people of Salem. Soon enough, they learn that he is cheated on his wife, Elizabeth Proctor, with a teenage girl. Despite her knowledge of the affair, Elizabeth Proctor still loves her husband and is unable to admit that he had an affair with Abigail Williams when questioned in court. She shows complete dedication to a man that cheated on her and even blames his adultery on herself, claiming that she knows deep down that he is a good man. While Elizabeth continues to suffer, John Proctor is celebrated as a hero when he refuses to admit to witchcraft, and dies with dignity, even though his death means that his wife is left with no husband and his children no father. While no one feels sympathy for Elizabeth Proctor, the people of Salem quickly forget John Proctor's past, and he dies a martyr. We praise a man that committed adultery. This specific type of discrimination is still often seen today. Men that have multiple girlfriends or have sex with numerous women are seen as players, while women that do the same are seen as whores. Also, male celebrities receive the John Proctor treatment. We ignore their suspicious past because they are so talented. We ignore the fact that Kobe Bryant is a rapist simply because he is one of the world's greatest basketball players. Will Smith is a great actor, so we don't care that he committed aggravated assault and nearly left a man blind. The list of NFL players that have committed domestic violence and still continue to play football today is astonishing. Despite the fact that America maintains that all people are equal, it seems to make exceptions for certain individuals. Males are discriminated against far less than females.
In The Awakening by Kate Chopin, Edna is not able to reach her full potential as an individual due to societal discrimination against females. Throughout the course of the book, Edna shifts from simply being a traditional mother to an independent woman with aspirations that go far beyond tending to her family and pleasing her husband. As the story progresses, Edna begins to explore activities such as painting. She also cheats on her husband with both Robert and Alcée. Leonce is very dissatisfied with the attention he is receiving, and that Edna is trying to become an independent woman, so he has her visit a doctor. A woman trying to pursue an outside life is so out of the ordinary in the early 20th century that it merits a trip to the doctor's office. The concept of marriage in the early 20th century is much different than what it is today. By marrying their husband, women agreed to do anything that is asked of them, and likewise, anything that pleases their husband. When Robert asks Edna to marry him, Edna refuses because she knows marriage will essentially ascend to what she has with Leonce, a relationship in which she is nothing short of a slave to her husband. Edna is metaphorically asleep until she swims in the ocean for the first time and has her awakening. The book concludes with a period of self-realization in which Edna decides that she would rather die than live in a world where she cannot explore her own personal interest and create a life outside of tending to her children and husband's every need. Gender discrimination continues to occur, specifically in the workplace, and some women are still degraded by parochial men today that feel the need to subject them to a lower status. Despite doing the same job, women make 75 cents to a man's dollar.
Hello, I'm Reardon, and I work for Medtronic, and I do feel that discrimination does exist in my workplace. There's 3 examples, one of which personally I would prefer to work for a male boss versus a female, because the male boss just tends to focus on the individual. Can the individual do the job? Do they have the skill set? The woman boss focuses on a lot more emotional aspects of the person. Do they like the person? Does the person get along well with others? So it's been my experience, it's been easier to work for a male. My second example would be projects. I support engineers in the workplace, and the male engineers tend to get the more complicated and complex projects. The women have to prove themselves with other projects before they're awarded those more complicated projects. And the last example has to do with the pay raise. Because I work in finance, I'm familiar with what everyone in the company makes, and I know that people that have the same job title are not paid the same. Even if they brought in, have the same level of experience, the male tends to get paid a bit more than the female.
America's fundamental principle that all people are created equally is contradictory, because women continue to be discriminated against. We wear a mask of equality that attempts to hide gender discrimination that still exists today.
The United States of America was founded upon the principle that all individuals are created equally and should be treated likewise. By reading numerous pieces of literature, we have concluded that despite America's attempt to stay true to these values, the country as a whole has many obvious flaws which leads to societal discrimination, both voluntarily and involuntarily, against what we believe to be inferior people. America as a whole is contradictory in wearing a mask, seeming to be inclusive, but on the outside, America is doing the very opposite.